I'm so glad you are here today at Church on the Drive. If we don't know each other, or even if we do, I'm Anna. I'm glad to see you. I'm the student pastor here. Thanks for my shout out, my crew over here. So I work with our middle school and high school students and our young adults, and it's just a very exciting time. And summer is like really close, and we're getting very excited about that here at Church on the Drive. So I hope you will join us for all of the exciting things coming up. And so I was thinking about a year ago, I was at a birthday party for a friend, and I met her cousin who had just moved to the area. So I was asking her all these questions like, why are you here? What brought you here? I just really like to know people's stories, like why you came to Orlando, why are you here? And so as we were talking, I said, well, have you found a community or people to be friends with, friendships, like what is that looking like in your life? So she started to describe this place where they met regularly with one another. They already had this group of this community built when she got there, but as she continued to go and continued to show up, she became part of the community, became a part of what they were doing. They had a shared goal that they were working towards every week, and they were encouraging one another as they were doing that. They knew each other's names, but they also knew their stories, their family stories. They had become this group of people that were walking through life together. And so she's describing this. I thought, well, I've heard about places like this, and I was expecting her to say, like, the name of a church, because it sounded like such a great, healthy community. And then she told me it was her CrossFit gym. I was like, I've done that once and never went back. True story. It was actually that day when I was talking to her, which is even funnier. But so she was telling me about this CrossFit gym that she had found this community of people where they were working towards a common goal together, which was getting healthy. They had their workout of the day that they were doing together. They were encouraging one another and pursuing better and better as they worked together in different things. They knew one another's names. They were consistently meeting together. They had built this community, this sense of belonging amongst their CrossFit individuals. And have you experienced a place like that before? Perhaps you are involved in a CrossFit gym. You know what that looks like, or maybe just a gym in general. Or maybe it's your coworkers, your workplace where you are. They're not just people that you see like Monday through Friday, but they're people that have become like family. You've lived life together. You've walked through things together. You know each other outside of the office. They've become more than coworkers, but a community of people. Or maybe for you, it's your neighborhood. Like it's the people that live on your street or live on your block. They're not just people that you casually say hello to, but you're in and out of each other's homes. Your kids are in and out of each other's houses. And it's become this beautiful sense of community and belonging where you live. Or maybe for you, it's your sports team that you play on. Maybe because of all the practices and all of the games and things, you've worked towards this common goal together. And so those people that you see with your sports team, they've become a family for you. Or maybe you're the parent of a kid on a sports team, and you keep seeing those same people at practices and all of those games, and you're in the group chats with them, and they're the people that you keep bringing snacks with, and it's become more than just this group of people that you sometimes see, but they've become like family because of the interactions you've had with one another, this sense of belonging that's been created even in the midst of maybe what your children are doing. I know for me, I've found this sense of community and belonging in a few different places. One is with the people that have also done this dopey challenge that I did. I've talked about before. If you're crazy like me and ran the 48.6 miles in 4 days and was at Epcot at 3 in the morning, you're all going to start building community together because they're crazy like you. And you really get to know someone as you're running 26 miles. Let me say, you get to know people's stories for sure. And so these people have become like family to me because we have this goal together, this shared goal, and that we have encouraged one another in what we've done. I've also found it in this choir that I am a part of. We meet every Monday night, and it's where our common goal is for our concert that's coming up or for a special event like we had yesterday. And there's all these different people that I have met through that I would have never met anywhere else, but they have become like family for me because of this common interest, this common goal, and just living life together with one another. Because if we're honest, there's this deep need within each of us, this human desire for connection, for belonging. And we know that there are places in our world that offer that type of commitment, that type of community. So why does the church matter? If I can find this community and this sense of belonging in all of these other places, then why should I be here? Why does it matter if I'm here with this group of people? What makes us different than, say, the CrossFit gym? Clearly, you're not doing burpees to get here, but you might. I don't know. We might all be, I'd just be on the floor if I tried to burpee, but we're not going to make you do those things. But we are working towards a common goal together, or we are living life together. So what makes us distinct? What makes us different? So perhaps this morning we start with, well, what is the church? We can't know why it's important if we don't know what it is or what this thing is that we're talking about. And so earlier this week, I posted on my Instagram story, I said, what is the church? I wanted some friends to tell me what they thought, but I posted, the first story said, what is the church? I want to hear all your answers. And then the second story said, and what is the church to you personally? Because those might be different answers, or it might be the same answer. I wanted to know what people think when we say, what is the church? So let me read you a few answers to that. So what is the church? It's a physical place of worship for the Christian faith. It's family, community, love. It's the place where I feel closest to God and truly the happiest, most at peace version of me. The church is the hospital for those who need help. One person said, my local church is my chosen family, and the church as a whole is God's gift to us. And another person said, the Little C Church, it's a building or even a group of people who meet together, like this specific church is what she was meaning. And then the Big C, the capital C Church, is this universal group of Christian believers. And that the church should be or is a movement focused on bringing heaven to earth. And I loved reading all of these responses because there were some things that were similar, but then also just knowing people's stories too and seeing the responses, you kind of see why they feel that the church is this place for them because of what they've experienced. And so I thought, well, what if we were to combine some of these and add a few other things? Let's have a starting point for this morning, right? So what is the church? It's here. The church is a community called by God and united through faith in Jesus, learning to love, follow, and worship him together. This community called by God, and then we're united. We have a similar common interest, which is Jesus. And then what do we do in that? We learn to love, follow, and worship God together. So in the Greek original language, if we were looking at the New Testament and how it was translated, like the Greek text is a lot of times what we would use. And so the word that's used there for church is ecclesia. So it's actually kind of two words put together. You know, we have those words like that. And so ek is like out of. So you think out of. And then ecclesia would be like kaleo, which is mean to call. So essentially it's saying it's the called out ones. And so when this word was first used, it wasn't necessarily a religious term, but it was this word to speak about this group of people who have been called out or set aside for a specific purpose. And so oftentimes when the church is referred to in the New Testament, that's the word that is used, the called out ones. And what we say, they are called out by God to do what? Like we just said, to learn to love others, to follow God, and to worship God together. It's this community of people. And we would say that it's not necessarily that the community is unique, because we just said that there's all these different places to find community, but what makes the church distinct is Jesus, is what the community is centered around, focused on, which is Jesus. And so oftentimes in the Bible, when the church is referred to, they're primarily talking about this group of people that have been brought together because of Jesus. Now, it might have been that he brought them together when he was still on earth, or it might be a group of people that have been brought together because they believe the same thing. They want to know more about who Jesus is, and so they were brought around this common person to find out more about him. And what do we do next now that Jesus is not here living among us? What happens now? It's this group of people that are figuring this out together. And so the author of Hebrews gives us a little bit more understanding about why the church matters and what's the purpose of it. So this letter, they're writing to the Jewish Christians. So it's a group of people that are believers. They're in a church together. And so it's almost like a reminder of like, this is why we meet together. This is why this is important. And so in Hebrews 10:22, they start out, it says, let us, so it's a group of people, plural, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with the full assurance that faith brings, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from the guilty conscience and having our bodies washed with pure water. So let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and full assurance that faith brings, that we can draw near to God and be confident in who God is, not because of what we have done, but because of faith. And the faith, being confident that what Jesus has done on the cross for us, has died for us, we can be confident in that and draw near to God. Meaning spend time with him, praying to him, worshiping him, drawing near, and it's together with one another to draw near to God. So they continue on and says, let us hold unswervingly. I don't feel like that's a word we use a lot, but unswervingly. So let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. So let us hold tight to the hope, hold tight to this hope that we have. And what is this hope? It's the hope of Jesus, that Jesus is the true, real truth and hope, that we can hold tight to that. Because, why? Because he who promised is faithful. God who promised is faithful. We just sang about that, the evidence that I can be confident in what Jesus has done. There's evidence for that in my life. I can praise God because of that. Or even last week, we sang about the goodness of God, and we sang, all my life you have been faithful. God, you have been faithful in my life, and I can hold tight to that in those moments when I need to remember that God has been faithful in my life, and God has been faithful in your life. So then in church, we can together share how God has shown up for me. You can share how God has shown up for you. It's going to be a sense of encouraging one another because we can share that together. We can share that experience with one another, saying, God showed up for me here. How has he shown up for you? And it continues on here. So with that, and then it says, and then let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. How we can spur one another on toward love and good deeds, how we can encourage one another. You know, in those moments where it might feel like you're the only believer that you know, you're the only one that knows who Jesus is, you're the only one in your life that has made Jesus the king of your life. Perhaps you show up on a Sunday morning and you look around and you see that there's other people in this room that have done the same. It's an encouragement to us to remind us that we're not alone, which we're never alone because God is with us. But the church also shows us this visible representation of that you are not alone. There are people here who believe the same, who also hold tight to that truth about God. And we can spur one another on for good deeds, for love. We just sang about that too. By our love, people will know that we are believers because of the way that we love one another and the way that we love the world. And it says, don't give up meeting together. Keep meeting together. Make it a habit to be with one another. It's in those moments where you look down that row that you always sit on. You know, we have our spots, I know. But we have our spots, and you look down your row, and you're like, that person's been missing for a few weeks. Or maybe you're in a small group, and you're like, you know what? I haven't seen that person in a while. It's checking in on one another because we've made it this habit to show up, to be consistent. So when someone is missing, we pay attention. Say, hey, what's going on? I haven't seen you in a while. It's a way to show up for each other and to share that love again. So Hebrews tells us we can be confident, we can draw near to God. It's important so that we can spur one another on. But then what does that look like? What does this practically look like in our lives? Well, the book of Acts gives us a little bit more information about that. So Acts takes place right after Jesus has been killed, he's been resurrected, then we see him ascend into heaven, and then this group of people are like, now what? This guy that we followed for so long, this man that was teaching so much, now he's gone, and what do we do now? What happens next? And so Acts follows the early church as they figure out what are we doing, and it figures out how it spreads throughout the world. And so we start in Acts 2:42, it says, so this is the early church, this group of people, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. So they devoted themselves, like they committed deeply to what? To the apostles' teaching. These people, these men that had been with Jesus, they deeply committed to knowing their stories. Maybe it was in a letter that they wrote, or maybe it was a story passed down, or it might have been specifically from an apostle that was still alive. They learned and devoted themselves to this teaching. And then to fellowship. They hung out together. They lived life together. That they were among each other. They knew one another. And then, here comes my favorite part, to the breaking of bread. They had snacks and they had food. I love it. If you don't know anything about student ministry, we always have snacks. It's a great thing. I have a ton of snacks in my room, right? I know, I got some students saying yes, right? We love the snacks, right? So they're breaking bread. But I also thought, there's so much you learn about someone when you share a meal with them. And I love that we have this program coming up, Table for Six, where you're sitting around a table learning from each other. You're sharing food together. We're not just doing that because we think it's a good idea, which it is, but it's also biblical. It's here to show, this is how the early church lived life together, that they listened to the teaching, they fellowshiped with one another, then they ate together, and then they also prayed with one another. They prayed for each other, they prayed for the church. There's these things that were happening that were practical that made the church what it was. And then let's see what happens next. They continued on. It says, everyone, so all of the people that were there in this church, they were filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. And all the believers were together and had everything in common. We keep going. It says, they sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. And every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. And they broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts. And it goes on, and it says that they were praising God together. And they were praising God and enjoying the favor of all of the people. And that the Lord God, he added to their number daily those who were being saved. That they, not only did they show up, but they participated together. They had this common goal of knowing more about who God was, about the teachings of Jesus. And they shared that with one another. And then it brought them to want to share everything together, to look out for the poor, to look out for those who needed help. And they had that common goal of helping one another, of being there for each other. And they were worshiping God. They were praising God for what was happening, and people were noticing. They were watching this and saying, something is different about that group of people. I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of whatever is happening there in that place. And so their numbers were adding because of what God was doing in their midst. We could say they did these 4 things, right? That they learned together, so they read scriptures, they knew the scriptures, they're learning about what it meant to be in community with one another, practically learning that, right, one-on-one. And they loved together, like they learned how to love each other. They weren't all the same people, and so sometimes you got to learn to love people. And so they were learning, what does it look like for us to love the people in our community and the people outside of our community? How do we love well? And they worshiped together. It says they were praising God. They were in prayer with one another. They were worshiping this God who is the reason why they met with one another. And they witnessed together. They witnessed to one another, I would think, but also to the world around them. The world was taking notice of what this group of people was doing, and they wanted to be a part of it. And you know, we've talked about this sense of belonging. You could see that these people, they belonged together. Everything had this word together, right? That they found this community, this place of belonging. And as we've said, you could find it other places. Like I'm sure there were other places that these people could have found belonging and could have found people to be in community with. But something brought them to this community, to this place. It was this belief in Jesus and the good news, the gospel, this hope of Jesus. They're looking for hope, looking for what do we do next? And they found it in this church. So we go back to our definition from earlier about the church. So the church, once again, it's a community called by God and united through faith in Jesus, learning to love, follow, and worship God together. Called by God, united by Jesus, loving, following, and worshiping God together. We are distinct from these other communities because of our love for Jesus and what we do about the love of Jesus. So our church, we have a mission statement here at Church on the Drive, and if you don't know it, I got you right here. So we have a mission statement. This is what we would say, this is the whole reason why we exist. It says to lead others in a growing relationship with Jesus. And what we would say is that whether you first found out about Jesus this morning, or whether you found out about him when you were 5 years old and have been loving him and learning more about him your whole life, you are in a growing relationship with Jesus. Each and every one of us is. And so our purpose here at Church on the Drive is to lead you in a growing relationship with him. that we are all continually growing, continuing learning, continuing to love, continuing to worship. We're growing in this relationship with Jesus. And then, how do we know if we've succeeded in that? How do we know if that happened? Well, that's our vision statement, which is here. So we would say our vision statement is to be the necessary and irresistible presence of Jesus in our families and communities. Meaning that if you are leading others in a growing relationship with Jesus, the way we know that it has worked, or the way that we know that that's happening, is that you are the irresistible and necessary presence of Jesus in your families and in your community. That by being in church, by growing together through our understanding of who Jesus is, we become this presence of Jesus wherever we might be. That there's something different, something distinct about you by being here. And it's that you become this presence of Jesus. You be a light wherever you might be. We talk about being a light quite a bit here at Church on the Drive, and while it is a great phrase, I love it, but it truly means to be a light, to be the light of Jesus wherever you are. It's this vision. It's being the necessary and irresistible presence of Jesus wherever you might be. That's how you are a light for each day. So the people in Acts 2, they were this, right? Like, people saw that something was different and they joined in with them. Their numbers continued to grow, not because of them, but because of Jesus through them. That people wanted to know what made them different. Why were things different for them? And it's because of Jesus. So I was looking back through those responses that people had sent me about what is the church. And I loved how one person answered that the church should be the ones that bring heaven to earth. And she continued on and said that the church should be working towards freeing the oppressed, setting the captives free, feeding the hungry, doing the work for the least of these. Another friend simply said the church is community and hope. That to be a light, to be the church, we bring heaven, the love of God, who God is, this glorious place. We bring that to earth by encouraging others, by being community for others, by bringing a sense of belonging to others. I think we could say it like this morning, that the church exists to bring hope. That might be to bring hope to us who are here this morning, a reminder that you are not alone, that life gets tough, but Jesus is here always. And I can look at how you have seen God faithful in your life, and you can share that with me, or I can tell you on a day that you're really struggling, hey, this is how God has shown up for me in that same place. And we can share that with one another. It's hope for each other as we're here. But it's also hope for the world, because we desperately need some hope today. No matter who you are in our world, we need hope. And the hope that matters, the hope that is real, is the hope of Jesus. The hope that Jesus died for us, that he loves us so much, that a life spent with Jesus is so much better than any other life. That there is hope in that. And as the church, we can bring that hope to the world, to one another, but then also to the world around us. That irresistible presence of Jesus, people will think there's something different about that place, and I want to know why. And when they ask us, it's because we tell them it's Jesus, because of what Jesus did and the hope that he brings. And truly, when we meet together, we're not just a club. I tell our students this all the time on Wednesday nights. Like, if we were just to hang out and just meet together and that's all we do, like, we're just a social club. But what we do is we hang out, we meet together, and then we make sure to talk about Jesus. Because he's the one that brings real, true change into our lives and true transformation and true hope. So every Wednesday night, we're going to talk about Jesus. And that's what makes us different than just a club hanging out. It's that we focus on who Jesus is. That's why the church is distinct. That's why the church matters, because we know what the true hope is, that the hope is found in Jesus. And when we live that way, when we live out that hope to those around us, then we become that irresistible presence of Jesus in our families and in our communities every single day. So may we be that hope to the world. May this place be a place that exists to bring hope to our communities and to our families every day. Will you pray with me? God, we thank you so much for who you are. God, we thank you that you love the church. God, that you have created this place to bring glory to you. God, that this place exists to share the true hope of the gospel with those in our midst. God, may we continue to be that hope. God, may we continue to look to you. God, as we learn more about you. God, as we love you more. God, as we worship together. God, may it be always about you and the hope that you bring. God, thank you for who you are. God, thank you for this place. And may we be the hope to the world. Amen.